At this time, I'm going to ask Jeremy Honeywell to join me on stage. Jeremy is the board chair-elect for the Greater New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center, and he will introduce the governor.
Thank you, Shauna, and thank you all for coming. Welcome to the 2016 Fit for a King Summit. Governor Edwards was inaugurated just this past Monday, and he's already fulfilled one of his campaign promises by issuing an executive order to expand Medicaid to So it's the end of his first work week, right? TGIF, right? I first met you when we were at a luncheon in Baton Rouge, and you discussed your views on the issues. I was most struck by how you acknowledged the need to work across the aisle, and that you needed to make compromises in order to move the state forward. I was struck then that I felt that you could become governor. And for those of you not keeping up with the news, I'm proud to report that he is in fact the new governor of Louisiana. Army Ranger, 8 years in the U.S. at the Louisiana House. I like patterns, and 8 years in the governor's office.
Got it.
I know you're not looking for re-election already. You're here to govern, and you're here to do, just as you said on Monday, do the right thing.
Amen.
So please join me in welcoming Governor Edwards.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to thank you for the invitation to be here with you today. It is a beautiful day outside. I will tell you, for me and my family, and I believe for the state of Louisiana, it has been a beautiful week.
Yes.
And I am as excited about the future of our great state as I can possibly be. I am so filled with hope about our future, what we're going to be able to do for our children. But as we gather today, there are a lot of challenges that we have to meet and overcome in order to have that opportunity be meaningfully available to all of us. Because it is time, and in fact, it's here. We now have a governor in Louisiana who's going to be the governor for all the people. I want to thank Senator Karen Carter Peterson and Senator J.P. Burrell. I will tell you that if you came and looked in my closet, you're going to see that I don't have color-coordinated sneakers for every time. And I can only imagine what the wardrobe budget has to be in order to pull that off. But they do a wonderful job in the state senate, are really advocating on behalf of not just people here in New Orleans, but people all across the state of Louisiana. And they now have a willing partner, somebody who's going to work with them in the governor's office, and I think you're going to see that pay dividends right away. At least that is certainly my hope. I want to thank you for what you're doing here today. I want to thank the folks at the Fair Housing Action Center and what you do every day to fight discrimination, to help people who may face foreclosure or inability to pay rents, find housing. It's incredibly important. Now, I come from a different world. I'm not that far away, but I'm across the lake in northern Tangipahoa Parish. And the things that I grew up with and being experienced to are probably different than what you all experience every day. But I know that you all have challenges, and that's why you have to have organizations like the Fair Housing Action Center to overcome those. And your work is a symbol of hope in this community, and your commitment really is the cornerstone of change. And I am reminded when I gather with groups like this, and as I was getting out of the car, the first thing someone told me is they were praying for me. Let me tell you, I am a person who believes in the power of prayer. And I pray every day. just for me, but for our great state and for all of our leaders here in New Orleans and in Louisiana, and certainly at the national level as well. But I'm reminded of one of my favorite passages from Scripture. And in fact, it was the gospel reading that I chose at the inaugural Mass on Monday morning. It's Matthew 25. Do it for the least among us. That's what this organization is about. And quite often we stop reading that passage before we get to the last part, because it is also true that that which you don't do for the least among you, that you also don't do for Jesus too. And so it goes both ways. It isn't you don't just get a star if you do it. You actually get a demerit if you don't. Okay? And we have to start looking at government as a proper institution to take care of the least among us. I happen to believe that that's one of the things that we ought to be about in state government. That's why I'm looking forward to working with you and the people that together we serve. I know that together we can make it possible for all Louisianans to be healthy and prosperous and to have a better quality of life. And put simply, together, we can pursue Dr. King's dream to make justice a reality for all of God's children. Now, it has already been a momentous week. I got inaugurated, I was sworn in. 24 hours later, I signed an executive order to expand Medicaid in state. It was just so obvious to me, and not just recently, but it's so obvious to me it's the right thing to do. For 3 years I introduced legislation to the legislature trying to force the Medicaid expansion. Well, when that didn't work, I just decided I'd be governor and would just do it. We've been sending our federal tax dollars to Washington, and then those dollars get sent to 30 other states that have expanded their Medicaid program so that their working poor get health care coverage delivered in their hospitals, clinics, and by their doctors, who then get the reimbursement dollars associated with that care, while our working poor have been going without, and our hospitals and clinics and doctors have been going without. That makes no sense to me. And I know that this is a nonpartisan organization. Let me tell you, the Medicaid expansion is nonpartisan because of the 30 states, 14 have Republican governors. So this is not right versus left, this is right versus wrong, and today we are on the right side. And one day, after signing that executive order, I was fortunate enough to greet and welcome the President of the United States to Louisiana and to Baton Rouge. And I was able to visit with him. And I asked him to work with us here in Louisiana to make sure the Medicaid expansion goes as smoothly as possible so that we can do it in a way that affords these benefits to people as quickly as possible with maximum benefit for the state of Louisiana, not just for the people, but for the providers and for the state as a whole, given the fiscal challenges that we face right now especially. I can tell you, I never met the man before. I never met the man before, but he seemed genuinely interested, and he was listening, and I know that he was taking this down, and they are going to be helpful to the state of Louisiana. But I do need you all to continue to push for this because it is possible. I don't think they'll be successful. There are some people in the state of Louisiana who aren't crazy about the president or crazy about Medicaid expansion or the Affordable Care Act, and they're going to push back. So I need your help to making sure that when you talk to legislators, your representatives and your senators, if you go to Baton Rouge and visit with people who maybe don't represent you, make sure that you support our efforts in this regard and that you let them know how important it is. Thank you very much. The next day, yesterday, I was with the president at a town hall meeting in Baton Rouge. And he announced that what he's going to ask Congress to do is make sure that in this next budget, that states like Louisiana, who were late opting into the Medicaid expansion, still get 3 years paid for 100% by the federal government.
All right.
That will help the state of Louisiana, again, given our challenges, and I'm going to get more into those in just a moment, because without any such relief, by the end of 2016, the 100% match rate goes away, and we're going to have to start paying more for the Medicaid expansion. Now, it's still the right thing to do, even if we have to pay more, because we know that the funding that we get for our safety net hospital system to care for the uninsured is going to go away, at least by 75% by 2020. So doing this is still the right thing, but if we can get 3 years paid for in full by our federal tax dollars, that relieves a burden on the state. And so I'm asking you to reach out to your congressional delegation, your members of Congress, your 2 United States senators, and your congressmen, to make sure that they understand how important this is as well. And I'm not just asking you to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to meet with them and ask them to make this part of the budget as well. So I'm excited about that. I will tell you that I had an opportunity to ride with the president from the airport in Baton Rouge to his hotel. That was a neat experience. You know, it was not lost on me that the president was in the last year of his second term as president. I was in my second day in my first term as governor, and I got to ride in that limousine they call the Beast. And we were able to talk about transportation problems that we have in Louisiana, riding on that interstate highway system. And I know that he was receptive to requests that I made for assistance in that regard as well. And assistance that is going to help us right here in New Orleans, where we're going to get extra money to do an off-ramp to connect I-10 to the new terminal out here at the airport. The truth is, Baton Rouge and New Orleans believe they're in competition with one another, and what they ought to be is one super region in competition with other super regions around the country. Wouldn't it be great if you could live in New Orleans and work in Baton Rouge, or vice versa? Or you could live in Baton Rouge and recreate in New Orleans, or you could live in Baton Rouge and take the train to the airport. You don't have to pay to park a car, and it's just what other places have done years ago.
Yes.
Now, this is another instance where I believe our previous governor set us back because he turned away our federal tax dollars that would have done this already. And so now it's going to be a little bit harder, but the concept is still worthy, and we're going to pursue it as best as we can. Now, let's talk for a few minutes about poverty. It's unacceptable when hardworking citizens don't make a living wage. You heard me say at the inauguration on Monday, and I said it throughout the campaign, $7.25 in 2016 is not adequate compensation for an hour's worth of work. And this is not a revolutionary idea. We have neighboring states in Texas and Arkansas that now have a higher minimum wage than that set by Congress. In the 2014 election cycle, you had states, while they were going to the ballot box and electing very conservative governors and United States senators, they also passed efforts to increase the minimum wage. States like South Carolina and Nebraska. We know that 65% of the people in Louisiana support an increase in the minimum wage. And so I'm calling on the legislature to do that, because it's just simply the right thing to do, especially when you think about the number of households that are headed up by single parents, especially single mothers. The idea that we would still work them for $7.25 and ask them to take care of themselves and their families on that wage, that's just not reasonable. And one thing I tell people, if you're against both increasing the minimum wage and government assistance for those who can't make ends meet, then you're really saying you don't care if people starve. Now, I would rather we had less assistance required, but that means we have to make people, make it so that people can actually support themselves on what they make.
Yes.
And so we have to do both. I'm committed to this. You're going to see some movement on this in the legislature. I think we're in good shape in the Senate. I need your help in the House of Representatives, perhaps. We need to just continue making our case. But the big difference you have now is you've got a governor who is on the right side of that issue. And I'm going to do what I can to make it a reality. Talk about pay equity. We're worst in the nation. 66 cents on the dollar is what we pay women in Louisiana with respect to the same amount that we pay men, or the amount we pay men for the same work, I should say. That is not acceptable. And it's not acceptable only for my two children, who happen to, well, I have three, two of them are female, but for all of our daughters,
Yeah.
and for all of our granddaughters. But I don't want to wait until our daughters enter the workforce. We need to make the change now. And so you can only do that with meaningful, enforceable, equal pay legislation. As you all know, I've called upon the legislature to take care of that as well. I want you to know that as part of any restructuring of the income tax in Louisiana, our tax structure, we have a structural budget deficit. We got to fix that with a new system. So that we have the revenue necessary to support our state, that I believe part of that new structure has to be an increase in the earned income tax credit so that we can make work pay. You should not work full-time, work hard and play by the rules, and still live in poverty. And this is not a liberal idea. It was actually something that Nixon started. It was embraced by Ronald Reagan. It needs to be part of what we do in Louisiana moving forward as well. And also with respect to poverty. There is a relationship between poverty and the highest incarceration rate in the nation, which we have here in Louisiana. And we have to attack that incarceration rate to make sure that people have every opportunity to succeed and become tax-paying members of society rather than As you know, we can do that without threatening public safety. We have the highest incarceration rates in the nation today, but we don't have the safest streets in the nation.
That's right.
And it challenges conventional thinking, but I happen to think the two are related. If you take a young man who makes a mistake, and he would benefit from some counseling, maybe mental health treatment, maybe substance abuse work, whatever it is, but rather than doing that, you put that young man in prison. Even though he goes into that prison or that jail and he's not a hardened criminal, by the time he hangs out with the people who are in there,
Right.
who are hardened criminals, guess what you get out the door later?
Yeah.
And then not only do you get out a hardened criminal, but because he got the felony conviction in the first place, it's going to be that much harder for him to get a job to support himself or his family. And so you're making it much more likely that he resorts to a life of crime than would otherwise be the case. And so it becomes a revolving door where none of us are better off. And I believe there's a way to break this cycle. The good news is we don't even have to reinvent the wheel because it's already been done successfully in other states. And you now have this unique opportunity where you have different groups coming together. Some of whom are very, very conservative. And they say, we just can't afford to continue to pay what it costs to keep this many people incarcerated. By the way, I agree with that. Some are very liberal and they just say, it's just the wrong approach in order to try to keep our streets safe. Guess what? I happen to agree with that too. But these two groups can come together and then you have the working majority that you need to make it happen. And that is where we are. And I want to tell you that we have a task force that has been created. It starts meeting, I think, next month or maybe in March. And by the time the 2017 legislative session comes around, which is just over a year away now, we are going to have a comprehensive legislative package aimed at ending, once and for all, this system that we have in Louisiana that has created the highest incarceration rate in the nation. this is where your prayers come in. We have a $750 million revenue shortfall just to get out of the current fiscal year. That's how much short we are on revenue to get to June 30th. When we turn the calendar to July, the year that starts July 1st, we're $1.9 billion short. Now, those are big numbers. Even in a state with a $25 billion budget, let me tell you, those are really big numbers. And that's where we're going to need a lot of help, a lot of cooperation. People are going to have to do things they wouldn't ordinarily want to do. And as your governor, I can tell you, I'm going to be proposing things that I don't want to do. The only problem is that what's worse is doing nothing or doing the same thing that got us to where we are. And so it's going to be a period where we're going to call on folks to work together, to have shared sacrifice, so that at the end of the day, there will be shared prosperity as well. And so this is a challenge like we haven't seen in a generation. We're going to need people to work together. We're going to need to shed our party labels, and we're going to have to be Louisianans first. And my willingness to do that and to work across the spectrum was sort of illustrated yesterday, where in the span of 1 hour, I went from President Obama's town hall meeting in Baton Rouge to addressing 1,000 members of the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry in Baton Rouge. And my message was the same there with respect to all of these issues as it is here today. We have to work together as Louisianans first, because people ought to have an opportunity to succeed right here. That means we have to make sure that education is available. It's got to be a quality education. We can't price it out of people's reach. And we've got to stop this drain where many of our best and brightest students are deciding that they have to leave Louisiana to get a good job or to have a rewarding career, which all starts with a great education. Now, if we have too many of our children deciding they have to leave Louisiana for that reason, then we are failing them.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, we are failing too many of our kids today. If we don't handle this fiscal situation correctly, we're going to fail a whole lot more of them in the coming years, and Louisiana cannot stand that. We don't have a margin for error that will allow that. So, let's all come together, and let's all meet the challenges, and then in a year or two, when everything evens out and we have sustained the state, and we've stabilized the state, then we're going to have tremendous opportunity as well. And I can't wait to get there, but we have to come together first. And that's why I want to thank you for this opportunity to be with you today. I want to thank you for what you do every day. And I want to call upon you to continue to work with the folks in Baton Rouge and the legislature and with my administration. And like I said at the beginning, I continue to ask you for your prayers. And if you will join with me with action and with prayer, there is nothing that together we can't accomplish.
That's right.
God bless you. Thank you very much.